Hi everybody. We are continuing with the Laws of the Soul webinar commentaries, and we're on commentary number 4, page 93, and we are in the Law of Sacrifice, and we're talking about the relationship of the fourth ray to that law and the need for any sacrificing entity to maintain its own state of consciousness and yet extend an aspect of itself into a lower field where sacrificial attention is needed, and thus a point of tension is created, or at least a tension between two poles is created. Perhaps we can say that the sacrificing entity takes his stand midway between them, accessing his own point of achieved consciousness, but having to deal with the requirements in the lower field as well. We've talked about the human being doing this, the planetary logos doing this, the solar angel and the solar logos sacrificing. It is a Saturnian law in many ways. It's always induces some degree of conflict in the sacrificing one until a very high stage of evolution is reached. It is the law of giving, and all that is opposed within one's nature to that giving will resist this higher urge. So let's see what the last sentence is here. I've written a lot of commentary. The consciousness, having worked its way through the subhuman kingdoms in nature, needed the activity of the solar angels to make further progress possible, and herein lies our service to God, the planetary logos, through sacrifice and death of consciousness in lower form, our service to other souls through deliberate self-sacrificing purpose, our service to other forms of life in other kingdoms. So it is always, to an extent, reducing the scope of one's contacts. I think we can say that safely, that sacrifice always temporarily reduces the scope of one's contacts, and hence opportunities for growth through expansion, but not opportunities for growth through deepening. Then, in fact, there is a great deal of opportunity, because under these sacrificial conditions, the heart becomes even more open. The heart becomes even more open and inclusive and resounding. So, we go on then. All this involves the death and sacrifice of a son of God, a solar angel, for from the angle of deity, descent into matter, manifestation through form, the taking of a body, extension of consciousness through the process of incarnation, all are occultly considered to be death. Okay, so this is the sacrifice of the returning nirvani, and we, the human monads, are also sacrificing in our in our own right by our pilgrimage through the lower 5 planes. It says, but the angels chose to die, and in dying lived. So, we too can be considered in our higher aspects to be the angel of the presence. It is an inherent aspect of our nature, the heart center of the monad, as it is called. But right now, we have to be very careful when we're talking about the angels per se, and when we are talking about the monads. The solar angels, of course, have their own monads, and probably located on a much higher plane than our own. But to what extent can we be considered the angels who chose to die? Well, our monads, in a way, are choosing to enter a denser sphere, and they pass through and take their position within the causal body, which is cohabitated, you might say, by the angel of the presence. So we, as we continue down into the lower three worlds, are accompanied by the consciousness of the angel of the presence to a certain attenuated degree. We are, in a way, the angel, because the angel, solar angel, in part of itself, substands what we are. So when we function as the ego on the higher mental plane, the solar angelic presence is with us and, in a sense, an aspect of ourself. And to that extent, we are angelic on that particular plane. Although we are not the returning nirvanis, we are the ones to whom the returning nirvanis have given an aspect of themselves for our benefit and to enhance the quality of our consciousness. But the angels chose to die, and in dying lived. Well, we can say that of man as well, can we not? We can say that as well of man, the monad. Through their sacrifice, matter is lifted up into heaven. Well, through our sacrifice and their sacrifice. It is a combined sacrifice. So we are dealing with a combined sacrifice. It is this theme which fills the pages of the Secret Doctrine and which is discussed in greater elaboration in a treatise on cosmic fire. Okay. We will italicize those titles. The sacrifice of the angels, the death, and we have to say that in consciousness, of the sons of God, the immolation of the mystic Christ. Well, usually immolation is a liberative act, but let's just say it is a method of escaping from form. The crucifixion in time and space of all living entities, because we have to say that time and space are the great crucifiers and containers, or let's call this restrainers. They contain and hamper. Okay, the crucifixion in time and space of all living entities, called souls, this is the theme of those books. So this is the mystery hinted at in the world of scriptures, and this is the secret of the ages, I think, to which modern religion is rather opaque. This is the secret of the ages, which is only discovered by the souls of men, and we can say by the human souls, the souls in incarnation, as each of them enters individually into conscious relation with his own, let's call it, higher soul, or ego, on the higher mental plane, and discovers that which he has so joyously, in sacrifice, done in the past. I guess the joy of sacrifice is something that often escapes us when we are buried in the lower worlds. Joy of sacrifice is to be considered. And we often do not when subject to the conditions of the lower worlds. So here each soul, the soul of man, enters into relation with his own soul, which is an extension of the monad in a sense. It is monadic consciousness plus solar angelic consciousness, a portion of it, and discovers that which he has joyously done in the past, and so arrives at the realization of that supreme sacrifice that he has made with deliberation, and there's our Saturnian word. Linking deliberate sacrifice to Saturn, and to the plane of spiritual will where Saturn is pronouncedly effective. And so arrives at that realization of that supreme sacrifice which he has made with deliberation in the early dawn of time itself, at least time as we count it, and how long ago, really? Let us say, in a way, much longer ago than merely 21 million years, because we have to deal with the enmetallization of the monad, the invegetalization, and the inzoonation, and whether our pilgrimage through those kingdoms occurred on this globe or not, it did occur. At least for those who are monads working through the lower kingdoms in this particular solar system, others began that pilgrimage in another and earlier solar system. So in the dawn of time itself, and it certainly would have been the dawn of time if we go back to the earlier solar system, when some of the nomads, it's like monads, only it's nomads, when some of the monads took their incarnation in those lower kingdoms, whatever those kingdoms were at that time. And so arrives at the realization of that supreme sacrifice which he made with deliberation and, we would say, and with joy. In the early dawn of time itself, in which at some point in his career, as a soul on earth, he consciously and symbolically reenacts for the benefit of other souls. So he descends from the soul level and not from the monadic level, and works to help, serve, and save other human beings. So he becomes a deliberate server, having come to full or almost full soul consciousness. Well, really, if he is really a savior, it will be to full soul consciousness in order to hasten their progress towards their goal. And we could say that, such are the members of the spiritual hierarchy now. Okay, then comes a life wherein in some form or another he portrays or works out within himself, but also before the watching world, that great symbolic drama we call, and the fourth ray is involved if we call it a drama. And at the fourth initiation, the fourth ray presides. So I think he will be talking about the fourth initiation here. So serving is coming before the period of the fourth initiation, so it's not only the masters. Such are the members of the spiritual hierarchy now, including the probationary initiates and third degree initiates. So this is, as a human being, a reenactment of the early monadic sacrifice. Let's just say that all of this serving and saving, all of this deliberate serving and saving is a reenactment on a lower turn of the spiral of the monadic sacrifice at the, quote, dawn of time. Well, dawn of time within our planetary sphere at least. Then he enacts the drama, and of course fourth ray is the ray of drama. One of the symbols of drama is to see the faces. Get this down a little bit here. The smiling face, the happy face and the sad face side by side. This is one of the emblems of the dramatic arts and of the life of the theater. And really, this is an enactment before the eyes of human beings. It's a great symbolic drama, but we cannot forget that it operates within himself as well as before the watching world. And it is the drama we call the sacrifice of a world Savior, or the crucifixion, the sacrifice of a world Savior. Now, maybe not everyone is on the path of the world Saviors, but the fourth initiation is always difficult to take, as there is such a relinquishment of that which is below. Such a relinquishment of that which is below. So this is the theme of the historical romance. He's using almost deliberately fourth ray language. The deliberate romance of all those great sons of God who down the ages have arrived at an understanding of the significance of the divine purpose of God, or of the Word incarnated through the planet, and this Word is the soul of the planetary logos, of those solar angels who are themselves the Word incarnate through human form. So we have the greater Word incarnated through the planet, and the lesser Word of the solar angels incarnated through the individual human being. And let's just say that only with understanding of these greater issues is the sacrifice of a world Savior undertaken. So it's not simply people having a hard time and serving and so forth. It's the understanding of a great picture of planetary purpose and what one can do at one's present stage of evolution, which is high, on the eve of the fourth degree, to contribute to the enactment of the plan which represents the purpose. What can one really do? A fourth degree initiate is, in a way, a planetary event, the life of a fourth degree initiate, and thus it is as we go on for the fifth, the mastership and shohanship. All of those, the achievement of all of those, can be considered planetary events beyond the individual. So the sacrifice of a world fifth Savior is the theme of the historical romance. It stimulates the imagination, and it has its heroes, villains, dramas, battles, crises, and emergence and victory. These are the elements of a romance. And great imagination of those who do far more than average people can do. The characters in a romantic drama are rather idealized and interesting to us for that reason. Of those great sons of all those great sons of God who down the ages have arrived at an understanding of the significance of the divine purpose of the Word incarnated through the planet, a deep understanding of what is the purposeful arrangement which is to be achieved in the lower worlds by following the divine purpose and becoming part of the plan. Of those solar angels who are themselves the Word incarnate through the human form, so let's say we must listen to the voice of the solar angel, which does speak its words of advice in the old commentary. So often, a voice proclaimed, a voice was heard, and so forth. It's the voice of this higher aspect of ourself, this wise aspect incorporated within our egoic nature. Whether they enact this drama as did the Christ so as to present to man the symbolism of death and sacrifice, and here we have to say the Christ as he guided the initiate Jesus through this process, or whether they enact this drama as did the Buddha so as to demonstrate to man the sacrifice and death of personal desire, to mention only two of the manifested sons of God, the Christ and the Buddha. And there are others, of course, who have gone through this sacrificial drama. I suppose we have Krishna, who was the Christ, going through this drama of the fourth degree. Later, it was Jesus who was going through a similar drama. We have many who are not named. We have Shankara, I suppose, along the Buddha line, showing the enacting the relinquishment of personal desire. Many have done that along the Eastern line of attainment. Too many for us to really understand. Maybe, well, in more modern times, Father Damien is listed in the same breath as the Master Jesus. He certainly gave up everything that could pertain to the personal welfare in a conventionally understood sense. He gave his life, his health, his dedication, everything, for the sake of those who were far, far less fortunate than he was. And he even, contracted their disease, which was leprosy. Well, there are many sons of God. We all have to go that way. It may not be through a literal crucifixion or a literal sacrifice of the life of the body in that particular incarnation, though we understand that often happens. But it may simply be the renunciation of all that has to do with worldly satisfactions and the leading of a life of relinquishment on that account. So whether they enact the drama as did the Buddha, so as to demonstrate to man the sacrifice and death of desire, to mention only two. The theme remains the same, the death of that which is lower, in order to release that which is higher, or on a larger scale, the death of that which is higher, in the order of scale of being, to release that which is lower. This is I think we can recognize it, kind of a two-way, fourth ray street. The fourth ray is involved here, each pole rendering a sacrifice through relinquishment of form and desire, or through relinquishment of consciousness and burial in the B-U-R-I, in the lower elemental worlds. And perhaps the midway point where one can manage both of those worlds must be maintained. But the lesson needs to be learned, and it is the lesson which man is now engaged in learning. And we can say during a most sacrificial period of human history, as we prepare to enter the fifth kingdom of nature, giving up that which is lower for that which is higher. Well, it's a mutual approach, isn't it? Sacrifice here. Sacrifice is a question of mutual approach. Maybe we can The high approaches the low and thus relinquishes and sacrifices. The low approaches the high, that relinquishing, sacrificing that to which it has been habituated. But the lessons need to be learned, especially on our particular planet, the planet of the cross. We can say all are ruled by the cross. And it is a lesson which man in these world wars, which violently detach him from all that he considered necessary for a life of the quality he insisted on having. We are learning these lessons now as never before. That death, as human consciousness understands it, this is the lesson: pain and sorrow, loss and disaster, joy and distress are only such because man as yet identifies himself with the form, with the life of the form, and not with the life of consciousness of the solar angel, that which the solar angel has made the higher human consciousness. We identify with the Cancerian familiar. We identify with the realm of the moon. We identify with the lower lunar realms and must be torn away from them through the processes of detachment. So, what is our lesson here? That death, as the human consciousness understands it, pain and sorrow, loss and disaster, and we have joy kind of thrown in there as well. I think commas are in the wrong place. Pain and sorrow, loss and disaster, joy and distress. A positive quality is put in there, but even that is a binding, magnetically binding condition where we seek our joy in the lower worlds. All these are only such because man, as yet, identifies himself with the life of the form. In other words, with the phantasmagoria. So we identify with the phantasmagoria. DK said that includes associated persons, and not with the life at the heart of the soul and the consciousness of the solar angel within the soul as the angel of the presence, whose awareness is potentially that of the planetary deity. That's a big hint, you know. How far can the consciousness of the solar angel really extend? Well, we do know that solar angels are in groups on their way to becoming planetary deities. There's that quote about the solar Petries coming forth in 49 groups, forming planetary rays, either here or elsewhere. It tells us about their tendency to join the path of planetary logoi or to join the ray path, whose awareness is potentially that of the planetary deity, whose greater awareness in his turn is potentially that of a solar deity, and what can we say, on and on with the solar logos having the potential to merge with the consciousness of the cosmic deity, and that cosmic deity with the consciousness of the supercosmic deity, or one about whom naught may be said. So always our rings past naught are expanding. But if we identify with the fate of the form, we shall have these vicissitudes, all too familiar vicissitudes. So, if we identify with the fate of the form, we shall have the familiar human vicissitudes on the scale from bliss to despair, So the moment a man identifies himself with his soul and not with his form, and all of this is accomplished through detachment, right? So through detachment, then he understands the meaning of the law of sacrifice, because the loss of form or its reduction in any way is not the main issue. The gain to the consciousness of the soul is the main issue. So then let us ask truly, with what do we identify ourselves at this time? Are we indeed identified as the soul on the plane of higher mind or beyond? So this factor of training the identificatory power of the spirit is extremely important in liberation. So the factor of training the identificatory power of the spirit, of the, let's call it monad in incarnation, is vitally important for release. And it's a serious question with what actually do we identify. We can say, oh yeah, we identify with the soul and as the soul, as the detached observer of all that transpires in the personality sphere, but is it true? We have to determine, is it true? So then, at that moment, when he identifies with his soul and not his form, he is spontaneously, he knows the meaning of the law of sacrifice. Why? Because as a soul, he wants to give, regardless of what may be the consequences in the lower personal sphere. So then he knows the meaning of the law of sacrifice. When identified with the soul, we really have to get that in our consciousness. He is spontaneously governed by it, and he is one who will, with deliberate intent, choose to die as the lower man would consider death, or to die through descent of consciousness. But there is no pain, no sorrow, and no real death involved. There is just the tending of a post from which sacrifice can be expressed as an energetic blessing for others. So it really comes down to a deep consideration of the level of our identification. We really have to practice disidentification every day. Disidentification and re-identification. I'm not this, but I am that. And Roberto Soggioli used to consider it necessary for psychological health. Otherwise, we become contaminated by illusion, glamour, and Maya until we barely know we are. So in that detached state of mind, we have to find the soul that we are and relinquish our cherishing of the instrument. We have to use the instrument, of course. We don't want to compromise it so that it's not useful and beat it up until it becomes a poor dead thing, as can happen. We learned in the Virgo labor of Hercules. But at the same time, we know what comes first, and we are so much in our soul consciousness as to really recognize the distinction between what we have now found ourselves to be and what we thought we were before. So this is the mystery of illusion and glamour. For these two imprisoning factors, from these two imprisoning factors, all world saviors are free. Let's just say they have passed beyond the third degree and thus have dealt a mortal blow to illusion. But, of course, from the ninth initiation perspective, all is illusion, O dweller in the shadows. Come forth into the light of day. If we are really associated with the cosmic physical plane, we are really embraced by a great cosmic Maya. So the degree or density of illusion is relative. So these world saviors, and it's not it's not unusual that we would be talking about them in relation to the law of sacrifice. It is, in a way, their law, the very first law, is foundational to all the others, and unless there is a sacrifice of the personality, then all of those group states which are associated with the laws of the soul and are their very core, these group states could not occur. So unless the personality is sacrificed, so that the higher consciousness can prevail, there will be no group states and there will be no true understanding or enactment of the laws of the soul. So these world saviors are not deceived by glamour and illusion, or by Maya, earlier conquered. It is well in passing to the world saviors are not deceived. I'm remembering, I've mentioned it, the man who thought he was passing through the fourth degree, but really had a chance that he did not fulfill to pass through the second degree. And DK explained to him why he could not be passing through the fourth degree, because of the clear-eyed approach that was needed to pass through that degree, not deceived. And the man at the moment was very subject to emotional conditions and was involved in all kinds of glamours with respect to his students. They are not deceived. It is well in passing to point out here that in the New Age we shall enlarge our concept of this term world savior, not just along the second and sixth rays, which were the rays of the Christ, or the sixth ray and who knows what personality ray for the Master Jesus, maybe the first. It is well in passing to point out here that in the New Age we shall enlarge our concept of the term world savior, and perhaps understand it along a number of ray lines. At present we apply it predominantly to those souls who emerge upon the teaching ray, the second or the Christ ray. They enact the drama of salvation. The middle rays, the second and fourth, I think, are good at picturing forth this conflict which exists between the poles. And when we see a situation in which that conflict is intense, we call it a drama. But this is an error due to the overpowering emotional glamour of the Piscean age, and I suppose its six-ray influence. Six-ray or six-round. This astral influence has its roots in the past Atlantean civilization, which preceded ours, so our connection to the Atlantean consciousness during the age of Pisces was very strong, still is. We're emerging from it only now. So, much that happens today and which may develop has its roots in that aspect of energy which is not yet dissipated. Not until the end of the 21st century will the Piscean energy be sufficiently reduced as to be almost non-existent. That doesn't mean that people will not be born in the sign Pisces and have echoes of that kind of energy which was so reinforced during the age of Pisces. Seeds sown at that time are now brought to flower. This is very good and necessary, even if a distressing experience. So what he's saying is interesting. Atlantean tendencies are now coming to flower due to the congeniality of the Piscean age and its relation to the Atlantean energies. Okay, congeniality. All right, congenial to the Piscean energies. And if you kind of think about America, is the air, it has said, under its sixth ray, is the heir to the sixth ray Piscean civilization. So Atlantis, America, and the sixth ray. Thank goodness there's a possibility of segueing that particular ray into the second. Okay. So it can be a distressing experience. The emotional body becomes out of control. Glamour misleads many. They chase after will-o'-the-wisps. They are disappointed. They are disillusioned, but they come to a better type, a truer type of vision. But the world's saviors must be recognized as coming forth to serve the race with sacrifice of some kind, along many lines and in many forms. So on all the different rays we can find this impulse to serve and to save. Unless a seed falleth in the earth and bringeth forth fruit, it is of no value. Completed in that way. That's the idea. So each one of us is a seed, and we must germinate all that we are within a lower type of energetic soil. That really is something to think about, you know. Each of us as a seed which must fall into the earth and bring forth a plant or fruit at the expense of all we had been before. So who may be these world saviors? Great rulers or dictators, politicians, statesmen, scientists, artists, sufficient sacrifice for humanity along a particular ray line will create the world savior, but not without sacrifice. The Pratyeka Buddhas are not such saviors. They move forward, perhaps carrying a staff without a crook, you know, the shepherd's crook, who can capture the wayward sheep. They move forward, they move forward. And although they can have very good effect because of their radiation, they are not per se working in the sacrificial mode. The bodhisattvas do work in the sacrificial mode. So notice rulers, first ray, dictators, first ray, politicians, well, first ray, third ray, seventh ray, sixth ray. DK said in Destiny of the Nations that it's the first, sixth, and seventh ray types, particularly that find their way into politics. Statesmen, the addition of the second and seventh to the first ray, and scientists and artists, fifth ray and fourth ray generically. Anyway, they can be those. Their work is the work of salvage, of restitution, of renovation, and revelation. All right, that pretty well tells us what a world savior does. Okay, salvage, reclaiming that which seemed to be beyond reclamation, finding usefulness in something which appeared to be just junk and cast away, restitution, bringing that whose day has passed back into a condition of useful, joyful functioning. We think we may be all washed up, as it were, but certain influences in the life can come in and restore. It's like restoration, restore us to some higher level of usefulness that we thought was beyond our grasp because of the state into which we had fallen. So their work is the work of salvage, of restitution, or renovation, making over, renewing all that is good, changing the form, and revelation of the revelation which always is, so that people may be more sensitive to reality. May be more sensitive to reality. And through the sacrifice of themselves, they accomplish it. In other words, they do not pay attention to the impact of their sacrificial actions upon their form life. If you've seen the picture of Madame Blavatsky as she's older, you know, she looks like she's been through many pots of coffee and very late hours as she has attempted to sacrificially write at white-hot speed the Secret Doctrine and other books for the benefit of theosophy in the world, and for many of us whose last hope, as Madame Blavatsky has said, is theosophy. As such, they must be recognized for what they are. Now they are misunderstood, misinterpreted, and judged by their mistakes more than by their aims, because none of these serving saviors is yet perfect. They carry such a high energy, and they are going into a low space where the approximation between what they are and that in which they have to work is ill-balanced. So they may release energy in a way which is not yet perfectly harmonized and tuned. But they, working under the law of sacrifice, along the salvational line, they are dedicated souls. They rescue, they lift, they integrate, they illumine, all many different ways of working, pulled out of the elemental life so that one is not buried alive or drowned or burned up, lifting up to the soul, integration into harmonious relations so that the psychological problem is solved and the psychosocial problem is solved, and in general they carry the light of the higher realms and make it possible for man to begin to live in these lower worlds, but have dual citizenship, as it were, passports for both countries, for the kingdom of the soul and for the lower kingdom of personality. So world saviors, through sacrifice, we have to realize what can come out of sacrifice. Okay, must be getting a little tired here. Through sacrifice they rescue when one thinks that all hope is lost. You can imagine rescues from a great torrential river, or from a cliff, or from a fire, any of the elements, from a hurricane. Rescue is usually needed. From a powerful display of the elements. We can drown in the storm, we can burn in the fire, we can be buried in the earth, we can be carried away by the tornado. The elements become empowered, out of control, and rescue is needed. And so the law of sacrifice will help rescue from samsara, which is basically the great Maya, the great world of illusion. They lift, they integrate, they illumine, and so they are working along a number of ray lines. As saviors, working along a number of ray lines, and the net result of their work from the angle of ultimate history is good. So there are those, they are reenacting, I suppose. Well, let's see. They are reenacting the original sacrifice of the monads, in which they fully participated. I suppose when you're in those higher worlds and all is beauty and bliss and immortality, one thinks one can descend into the lower worlds without much problem and carry out the mission of redemption without having a compromised consciousness. But then a funny thing happens on the way into the lower worlds, and one becomes identified with them, and oftentimes the rescuer is in need of rescuing. Their effect is good. They have the will to serve, and they have the will to sacrifice, and they have the will to save. Well, that's the will to serve again, but let's just say the will to save. I'm sure I have it somewhere in my abbreviations. The net result is good, and it's towards this type of orientation that we start to incline ourselves. The law of sacrifice and the impulse to give can also be traced throughout every kingdom in nature. Well, I think, this may be a good place. We'll keep these programs to about an hour at this point. The end of Laws of the Soul, webinar commentaries, number 4, EP2, page 95. Right, let's see what else is coming up. Okay, yes, page 95, and we'll begin with Laws of the Soul, webinar commentaries, number 5. EP2, page 95. Let us have the great invocation. Would be a good way perhaps to end this program. Okay. So. And if I can find my pitch pipe, well, there it is. Okay. The note G. The note G. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men, let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Well, let us find a way to understand these laws of the soul deeply and incorporate them into our life so that they are characteristically the laws by which we live. Okay?